Hello, my name is Bihan, and I'm the product manager for Scale Spellbook, which is the developer platform for large language model applications. I'm super excited to welcome you all to the webinar, the 2023 Zeitgeist Report, Generative AI and Best Practices for Enterprise Adoption. At Scale, our mission is to accelerate the development of AI applications. Over the past several months, the hype around generative AI has flooded popular discourse. Most companies have already added generative AI to their business strategy, and as we will find out, those who don't quickly adopt this technology will fall behind their peers. Media coverage highlights the extreme views of complete job displacement, artificial general intelligence taking over the world, and security and privacy concerns. But you'll be hard pressed to find practical, actionable advice on how to actually take advantage of the power of generative AI to accelerate your business. This is why we are excited to share the second edition of Scale Zeitgeist. In this report, we look past the hype surrounding generative AI to see what it really takes to adopt it in the enterprise. The report reflects the responses of over 1,600 machine learning practitioners and business leaders that work with AI. We covered various industries from insurance and financial services to logistics, retail and e-commerce, and software companies. We looked at companies that are more advanced in their adoption of AI and those that are just beginning to experiment. We had conversations with respondents to dive deep into what makes them successful and the challenges that they face. Today, we'll be sharing a summary of our key findings, insights from the report, and our latest observations from working on the ground with Fortune 500 companies, helping accelerate the deployment of generative AI. To help us navigate this landscape, we are joined today by Jonathan Rosenbluth from Cohere and David Rokeach from Scale AI. Jonathan Rosenbluth is the Director of Product Strategy at Cohere. He engages with customers and the Cohere team to develop the strategy for product development, to identify new features and products that make it easy for businesses and developers to create value using large language models, and to craft an approach for bringing this technology to market. David Rokeach, the VP of Enterprise AI at Scale, is an expert in large-scale AI initiatives for the world's largest companies. He has led the strategy, development, and deployment of complex AI solutions across industries, including insurance, retail, consumer goods, media and entertainment, and financial services. Jonathan and David are going to help us examine the results of the Zeitgeist report and dive deep into what it actually takes to adopt generative AI in the enterprise. So now I'll pass it over to David to get us started.
Thank you, Bihan. Thanks everybody for joining. Excited to talk to you today about our Zeitgeist report and some of the observations that we're seeing on the ground working with large companies deploying generative AI. Generative AI is truly the tech innovation of this generation. We are only scratching the surface of its impact today, but in the long run, we believe at Scale that this technology will be as impactful as the internet. It's poised to disrupt fundamental enterprise business models and industries across financial services, media, insurance, retail, and more. We'll be investing billions of dollars into this technology to adapt to the changes. Our Zeitgeist report surveyed business leaders and practitioners at the very outset of this tidal wave of excitement. And combined with our observations working with large enterprises every day, there are three things that really are standing out about the state of enterprise adoption of generative AI. The first is maybe somewhat obvious if you're following any news lately, but the attention and investment in AI has exploded in an unprecedented way, and that will continue to grow. From our report, we found that 72% of companies plan to increase their investment in AI in 2023, and we're also seeing increased interest on the ground with our customers every day. And so anecdotally, virtually every Fortune 500 company we're talking to is having new or renewed conversations at the board and C-suite level about how to move faster on AI development. The second is that fine-tuning and RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback, are more and more becoming the keys to performance improvement for specific enterprises. Base foundation models, they're really good at a broad set of tasks, but they're often poorly equipped for specific enterprise tasks out of the box. And oftentimes can be outperformed by fine-tuned models on high quality and proprietary data. In fact, companies like Bloomberg have gone as far as training generative AI models of their own to achieve better performance than base models. And foundation models without customization are trained only on public data, which means they can't provide responses that require knowledge of an individual company's data, such as company-specific support policies, product guides, pricing, etc. The third observation from our report is that there's really a gap. The similar priorities are emerging, among industries. You're seeing, assistance and customer engagement. So co-pilots, for example, generative AI that can assist employees to do their jobs better across a wide range of tasks. Think about analysts that need help summarizing reports, or wealth managers analyzing asset allocations for a large number of customers, or insurance claims adjusters navigating complex claims. These are all similar in the way that they're built and the co-pilot functionality that is offered. And this is a primary use case we're seeing. The second is customer engagement. So, think chatbots for e-commerce websites, or automated systems that are actually smart. And a more complex world calls for more intelligent software and more personalized ways of communicating with your customers. And these are all things that we're seeing stand out. So we'll go through some of these insights and some of the data that we're seeing today, and talk through further implications around how enterprises can really adopt and accelerate the use of this technology. So I mentioned the increase in investment. In summary, what we're seeing here, what we believe, is that we are just now entering the industrialization era of generative AI. And really what this means is that we're about to move from this phase where companies are experimenting and exploring, and instead really moving towards a world where implementation is the name of the game. 72% of respondents said they plan to increase investments in 2023. And while there's a lot of hype around that, a lot of that's driven by fear of missing out. The reality is that this isn't just a hype bubble. The power of generative AI is real, but the important part is to look past that hype and understand what it really takes to implement AI. And what we're finding is that leaping from experimentation to implementation is hard. And so while investment is growing and it's easy to get started, companies are finding that there's hard work behind the hype. In fact, less than 20% of enterprises have deployed generative AI models to production, according to our Zeitgeist survey. So to get started exploring what enterprises need to do to accelerate implementation of generative AI, let's define a couple terms about some things that are critically important to scaling up and getting real performance out of your solutions. So the first thing here is fine-tuning. This was the second observation that we had, that this is becoming more and more critical to enterprises scaling up their generative AI solutions. Fine-tuning and human feedback are critically important, but what exactly is it? Base foundation models oftentimes are really good at a number of things, but need help getting to high levels of performance on specific tasks and on specific sets of data. Fine-tuning base models with specialized data, basically both providing the inputs to that data and guiding the model to understand and then respond in a way that is trained through that data, helps to essentially inform very specific sets of tasks on very specific sets of company proprietary data. During fine-tuning, you bring in that domain-specific data and help teach the model how to work with it. So you essentially can provide prompts and responses and tell it that this is what good looks like. And to get the most out of large generative models, you need to be able to provide that additional information to models to continuously improve their performance. And as we talk about fine-tuning, one technique of fine-tuning that's proven to be in many cases the most powerful for many applications of generative AI is what we call RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback. RLHF it's using human feedback to improve performance on a specific task, and really incorporate human preferences into model outputs. Scale has worked with the builders of the largest generative models out there to provide RLHF to improve model interactivity. And it does this by making them more interactive, less prone to hallucinations, makes them easier to interact with and understand. And it's a way to basically incorporate human preferences for language, logic, accuracy that aren't inherently captured by the original training of the foundation model. So first, a prompt is submitted to the model, and multiple outputs, the model creates multiple outputs. Then a human ranks the outputs from best to worst based on their own human understanding of what good looks like for that particular task. And then that ranking data is used to train a reward model, which is used to then tune the outputs that you get when you actually submit a prompt as a user. And so these are really important ways of tuning and getting to a high level of performance. And what we're seeing is that these are really the key to improving the performance of models that are necessary for true enterprise deployments. This is one example here from what we've seen where, working up from a base, sort of non-fine-tuned base model all the way through, regular fine-tuning and up into human feedback. You just see continuous improvements as you kind of walk up this ladder of tuning and RLHF. The right-hand side is just an example of, a prompt asking the model, explain the moon landing to a 6-year-old. And the initial base model without human feedback doesn't actually really make sense. It doesn't know how to respond to that in a way that a human, especially a 6-year-old, could understand. But with human feedback, when the model is trained with preferences around language, concision, and other things, it comes back with a really good model. So the Instruct GPT model, which incorporated human feedback, actually gives you a real answer that maybe a 6-year-old could actually understand. Now, to get the most value out of large generative models, many enterprises will need to fine-tune their base models using their proprietary data and building up data sets and providing human feedback. But what we're seeing in this report and from our experience with customers is that the biggest challenges for fine-tuning models are in acquiring training data and the ML infrastructure for managing fine-tuning large language models. And so, 57% and 54% of respondents, respectively, found that those were really big issues or challenges that they faced in being able to, do this fine-tuning and incorporate human feedback to improve those capabilities over time. And so we'll talk later about how Scale's data engine and our generative AI platforms help large enterprises solve this challenge and fill this gap. As we've previously mentioned, customers that are adopting AI are seeing positive outcomes. We're seeing these outcomes when we help our customers implement generative AI, and even in their early pilots, there's real impact that customers are seeing. We're working with Fortune 500 companies today on deploying large language models in a variety of applications, from Coke Industries to partnerships with Accenture and others. We're seeing that the positive outcomes are real, and so the ability to develop new products or services is clearly a top issue and a top outcome that they're seeing as a result of this, or to augment improve the functionality of existing services. And you'll just see continuously over time as companies move from experimentation to implementation. We expect these numbers and the breadth of impact to really grow and expand. And this is really important because generative AI, like you're seeing these headlines and it feels new to many folks, but really the proof is in the changes that are happening and the actual where the dollars are going and where the decisions are happening in the enterprise. You're seeing major advisory services firms are making billion-dollar investments in AI. You have all of these companies pouring investment in, reorganizing their business to find ways to deploy generative AI quickly. IBM recently announced that they'll be pausing hiring for many roles because the CEO anticipates thousands of them could end up being replaced with AI in the near future. And so a lot of companies are viewing this as an existential threat to their business. But the ones who move quickly have the opportunity to actually disrupt their own business models and gain real advantages versus their peers and turn that potential disruption into an advantage. So let's dig into a couple examples of industries that we're seeing in our report and from our experience. They're making significant investments in generative AI and better understand some of these use cases and how companies can deploy. Across every major industry we surveyed, we mentioned they're all expecting significant investment increases over the next 3 years. Leading the pack actually in our survey was the insurance space. Typically, this is a more risk-averse and slower-moving industry to adopt new technology, but it's built. The whole industry, the whole concept of insurance, is built on data and being able to make better decisions as a result of it. and manage risk as a result of having that information. But in the insurance space, a lot of legacy processes are incredibly manual. And so they're seeing this as a real opportunity to short circuit those processes and do things differently. And so we see these disruptive opportunities here and across other verticals are really significant. In insurance specifically, they're primarily focusing on improving the customer experience, which aligns with their core business and in taking care of their customers and making sure that they retain their pool of policyholders. They're also looking at operational efficiencies and reducing costs, and there are real opportunities there across the landscape, particularly with the large companies, very large operational organizations, to be able to simplify and augment human performance. And what we're seeing specifically in the applications here, and this gets to some of the use case trends that we're seeing, insurance is a really great place for these sort of like co-pilot tools, where generative AI can help to augment human operational decisions, whether that be, in this case, claims processing is really standing out as a place where insurance companies see applications of generative AI to augment and improve the performance of their adjusters, help them solve claims faster and more accurately. Fraud detection is another example. Risk assessment and underwriting. You can imagine, your underwriter teams having co-pilots that can support, decision making and pricing decisions, having all the information about the risk inherent in a policyholder's application or otherwise. In retail and e-commerce, it makes sense that they're appropriately focusing on growing revenue and improving the customer experience. This is core to their business. But specifically, as we're looking at the applications, the other sort of trend that we're seeing in early use cases is around customer chatbots. They have long been promised to streamline operations, reduce workloads, while providing a better user experience. But until recently, they've frankly just been kind of a major pain. But with the latest generative chatbots, especially those fine-tuned on a retailer's specific data, these experiences can finally live up to the promise. Engaging discussions, including recommendations that can dynamically respond to customer input, are changing the game for large and small retailers alike. Financial services is another area where there's significant investment and speed of movement here to deploy generative AI. This is another place where we're seeing co-pilots. In this case, investment research is a priority opportunity for companies to improve how they deliver, how they manage investment research internally. And specific to that example is, how are you going to leverage AI for investment research? We asked, and there are a number of applications that they see. So, a financial services firm, whether it's your analyst teams or even wealth advisors, you can use generative AI to summarize content, look at research reports or analysis, understand data and trends, classifying different topics or otherwise, and provide insights that can happen much more rapidly than traditional, research processes and manual, flipping through of content. And so these are all, really great examples, of how enterprises are deploying this. We'll talk a little bit in a moment about how Scale helps companies jump from experimentation to implementation. But for now, we'll turn it over to Bihan to introduce the next section.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Now that we have a good sense of the landscape, we'll have Jonathan walk us through how Cohere builds LLMs and some of the top enterprise use cases.
Bihan, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. As Bihan mentioned, I'm the Director of Product Strategy at Cohere. And at Cohere, we focus on bringing large language models to enterprises. And during this next session, I'm going to ask you to participate, so please get ready to be active in the chat. And to kick this off, I'm going to ask that you just share where you're located today. So wherever you are, just share that in the chat, and we can get a sense of who we have with us today. While you're doing that, I'm going to dive right in. So over the last half century, there's been a new technology released every 10 to 15 years that transforms our societies, our economies, how we access information, and actually just transforms our lives. There was the personal computer, there was the web browser, mobile apps, and now there's generative AI. So I'd encourage you to take a second and think about how these technologies have shaped your personal life and also your professional life, and even our society. What would society look like today without the web browser? I'd say it would look very different, and my life certainly would be changed. So the latest technology in this list is generative AI, which I believe will be even more transformational than everything that came before, and that's a pretty high bar given what's on this screen. So our CEO at Cohere, Aidan Gomez, talks about the scope of this transformation as akin to the Industrial Revolution, but for knowledge work. Now, it's hard to predict what change will look like when the scale is the Industrial Revolution. But just because it's hard doesn't mean that you don't need a perspective and a strategy for how your org will win. So that's why we're here. And I'm going to try to arm you with some information that will help you do just that. So in this conversation, I'm going to discuss one of the biggest pain points to large language model adoption at the enterprise level that I've been seeing, an exciting technological development that is solving that pain point, and a few best practices for winning in this era. So I told you this would be interactive. We're going to do a quick exercise. I'm going to ask you to think how you would complete this sentence. And in some way, I'm asking you to pretend to be a generative language model because you're predicting the next word or words in this sequence. And as I complete this exercise, generative language models are blank. For me, it's know-it-alls. Generative language models are know-it-alls. If you ask a generative language model a question, it will give you an answer. Now, it does know a lot, so it's often right, but it also gets answers wrong. Now, I can picture a couple of people that I know who, if I ask them a question, they will give me an answer with complete confidence. And sometimes they're right, but sometimes they're wrong. And I don't know about you, but I don't love it when someone is extremely confident and extremely wrong. So in the Scale Zeitgeist report, the #1 goal for organizations adopting AI was to improve customer support. Now imagine a customer support chatbot that gets the answer wrong 15% of the time. It's not that useful. And this lack of accuracy is one of the biggest barriers to enterprise adoption. The lack of accuracy leads to a lack of trust and just a lack of usability. So we're left with these amazing demos that are not solving business problems. So I'm going to jump to another exercise. And my question for you is, what is the temperature in Sudbury, Ontario right now? And what I'm going to ask you to do is not guess. I'm not looking for you to be a know-it-all here. I'm looking for you to look up the answer and share the response in the chat with this citation of where you found that response or that answer. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to do this. I'm going to pause here while you complete this task. All right, now I'm going to jump back in, and because I don't have a live view of the chat, I don't know if the answers are streaming in on fire right now or not. But what I do know is the temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit in Sudbury, Ontario. And how did I know that? Well, I went to Google. I Googled it, and I found what the answer was, and then I was able to piece it together and figure out that the temperature in Sudbury, Ontario is 75 degrees Fahrenheit right now. This is a fairly common human process. You get a question. You don't know the answer. You look it up in an external knowledge base, Google. You find the up-to-date information, you interpret the info, and you generate a response with a citation. Now, I'm seeing a few people, and I'm hearing sort of through the side that it's somewhere between 74 degrees Fahrenheit and 76 degrees Fahrenheit on Google. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm located in Toronto, so I'm doing some mental math on converting it from Celsius to Fahrenheit for this group. But the process that we all undertook to get the answer to this question is actually a fairly common human process. And it contains the key to solving the problem of the know-it-all generative AI model. And this process is retrieval augmented generation. So I'm going to give you a live example of something that I did recently, which is I asked the Cohere chatbot, an internal chatbot, what are the values of Cohere? And this is, I'd say, a more complex question than just asking what the weather is. So when I asked that to our bot, it ran a query against our documents and retrieved the most relevant, let's say 100 documents. It then took those documents and re-ranked the documents in order of most relevant to the query. So there's 100 documents that probably contained something about Cohere's values. But it took, let's imagine, the most relevant 5 documents and fed that to the generative language model with the command to answer my question and provide a citation. So as the user of the chatbot, all I saw was my question and the response. But behind the scenes was the entire process you see on the slide, which we call retrieval augmented generation. And at Cohere, we're making very heavy investments in this space. We have Nels Ramers, Patrick Lewis leading a lot of the effort at different phases of this process, who are the leaders in the spaces of retrieval, search, and retrieval augmented generation. So what's the impact of retrieval augmented generation? First and foremost, it improves accuracy. The model is no longer relying just on what's in its training, but it's actually able to tap into an external data source that contains the right answer to the question. It also improves temporal relevance. You're no longer limited to the last time the model was trained in order to get up-to-date information, because these external knowledge bases are updated seconds, minutes, hours, depending on what the knowledge base is. And finally, it becomes very easy to verify, because a citation can be provided to where the source document is, which makes it far more usable. And so all in all, this is, I'd say, pretty transformative for making these models useful in the business context. And while this is true across like a huge swath of use cases, we're hearing particular excitement around a couple use cases, which dovetails very closely with what was found in the Zeitgeist report. The first is customer support. So imagine replacing interactions with awful customer support bots and replacing that with a fluid, automated agent that can respond to any relevant question, can jump from one topic to another based on what you want to know about. I think that would be far more enjoyable, if you ask me, of a customer support experience than what I've found with legacy chatbots. And the other application is the enterprise intelligent agent. Imagine being able to ask any question where the answer lies somewhere in your organization's documents and just getting a response generated for you with a citation. Like, which product showed the most growth in Q1 of 23? And you no longer need to spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes searching through documents and different sources to find the right answer. Bingo, it's shared with you with a link to the source document. So I can't imagine doing my job without the internet. And I'm gonna make a big bet here that most people on this session would feel the same. And in a few years, people won't imagine being able to do their jobs without enterprise intelligent agents, because they're going to be so useful, so helpful, that they're going to spread extremely quickly. So we've spoken a little bit about the know-it-all problem. We've spoken about the retrieval augmented generation solution. So now I want to pivot to what you can do. But in order to do that, I want you to picture yourself in the mid-90s with all the knowledge that you have today. And I want you to think, what would you advise a group of cross-industry leaders about how to win in the age of the internet? And I know we've got some folks from Google in this session, and the answer cannot be invest in Google. Okay, so that's not how you're going to win in the age of the internet. What would it be? What would you give advice to cross-industry leaders? I'll invite you to share in the chat or just think to yourself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you just a few pieces of advice, of best practices. Over the past 2+ years, I've worked with and spoken to over 400 organizations interested in adopting NLP. And there's 3 pieces of advice that I would give. And my hunch is that some of this will overlap with the themes of what you would be advising groups in the mid-90s about winning in the age of the internet. So the first piece of advice is to start building today. It is important to be thoughtful around use cases, for sure. But it is even more important to start building the muscle of adopting this new technology and learning by building what the technology can and can't do, how to leverage it to build products, what challenges come up, how do you overcome these challenges? These are not theoretical questions. These are practical, real-world questions that you only can solve by building. The biggest barrier that I see in enterprise adoption is paralysis prior to building, fixating on use case choices, and trying to figure out the answer to every question that will come up as you start building. What I've seen from my work is that organizations that adopt the earliest are best positioned over a longer haul to adopt new evolutions in the technology and turn them into impactful products. The second piece of advice is to make this the domain of product teams. Historically, LLMs have been the domain of corporate research, not of product. This needs to change because this technology is relevant for products today. Now, that does not mean that corporate research doesn't have a role to play, but corporate research teams need to start adapting to working on product timeframes, not on elongated corporate research timeframes. Finally, protect your data. In today's day and age, data is one of our greatest assets and differentiators. And make sure that when you are training and utilizing these models, that your data is protected. At Cohere, we're very proud of being leaders on the private and secure deployments of large language models, and we enable you to utilize and train these models safely in your own environment. So as I wrap up, if there's anything that you remember, please don't make it what the weather is in Sudbury, Ontario right now. Instead, remember to build, to productize, and to protect. Those are the three keys. If you follow those, you'll be positioning yourself very well to win in the age of generative AI. And so now I'll pass it back to Bihan, who will introduce the next section.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Now we'll go back to David to walk through the best practices for enterprise LLMs and for a look at what's in store for 2023.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Bihan. We discussed some of the observations that we're seeing so far this year in generative AI and how the technology is changing the landscape for many industries. We've seen that many companies are struggling with the software tools and expertise they need to deploy generative AI and leverage fine-tuning and reinforcement learning from human feedback. And we've seen some priority use cases starting to emerge. So what I'll share now is some detail on what we announced yesterday, actually. Our Scale's Enterprise Generative AI platform has been formally launched. We're already working with some large Fortune 500 companies on deploying this platform and helping them take advantage of this new technology and really deploy new solutions in practice on the ground to drive actual outcomes. We'll talk about how that translates to best practices and how your organizations can begin to deploy these technologies as well. So I'm excited to announce that we did formally launch our Enterprise Generative AI platform, or what we call EGP. And this is a full stack generative AI solution for enterprises that enables companies to move from experimentation to implementation. With EGP, Scale helps businesses accelerate the value and time of developing applications, identify the models that best suit your business needs, customize those models with high quality proprietary data, and improve and maintain your safety and security of your data and IP. And what we're seeing in this space, when we talk to virtually every enterprise out there, some version of one or more of these three challenges always comes up as they're looking to really deploy and implement generative AI. The first is customization and fine-tuning. We talked about how this is a critical element of improving the performance of models to achieve a real level of enterprise performance that they can rely on. And we're seeing that foundation models are often outperformed by customized ones. And this is really important for companies, but they're finding it difficult to acquire the data and use the tools and to develop the tools that are needed to really do this at scale. The second is safety and security, where cloud models can leak proprietary data, IP, and others, and maintaining the security of your data is top of mind for not just the CTOs and chief information security officers, but the CEOs and the business leaders as well. And the last is enterprise readiness. So being able to deploy infrastructure at scale with true enterprise grade components built in. And also, there's just a lot of small kind of point solutions out there. So companies are looking for more holistic full stack solutions. And so, we've developed a number of offerings for our customers that help them on their generative AI journey. And we use this platform to enable these goals. The first thing that we do is we help to customize foundation models for large enterprises. And so, when we look at really specific industries and specific use cases, there's significant value in developing these really customized and fine-tuned models for those purposes. And we deploy our best-in-class data engine to create the fine-tuning and human feedback integration that's needed to develop these assets for our customers. So that's point number one, and where we see just a ton of value for companies as they're looking to build a differentiated capability. The second is the platform itself. So we use this, on our side to build models and applications for customers, but we actually really focus on deploying it and installing it for our customers as well. And we'll describe what this looks like. But the short story is that we're able to deploy this full stack solution directly in our customers' virtual private cloud to enable them to experiment, test, fine-tune, and deploy enterprise applications very quickly and at scale. And then the last is enterprise applications themselves. So we help build bespoke, customized enterprise applications tuned on your data for your priority use cases so that you can very quickly get to real tangible business value. And so this is what we've focused on, addressing some of those core challenges as we've built out this platform and capability. The first thing that we focus on is customization and performance, where we help our customers fine-tune models on their proprietary data. Enterprise-grade security, where we help large enterprises protect their data and IP by deploying in their virtual private cloud, implementing best-in-class role-based access controls and other security components, and making sure that they feel comfortable with what models they're using for what use cases with what data. The last is flexibility and scalability. So our platforms enable us and our customers to test, deploy, compare performance, and then monitor the best models for any unique application. And we make this very simple and easy for developers creating AI applications. And so I'll talk just for a minute about what this platform looks like and how enterprises can use these types of solutions to scale up more quickly. The summary here is that our offering, EGP, is truly a full stack solution with all of your proprietary data securely built in your own virtual private cloud. And where we start is with the foundation models. So whether it's Cohere and Jonathan's team, or Anthropic, or OpenAI, or a library of open source models, Scale is truly model agnostic because we believe that there are different models that can serve different purposes and perform better at different tasks with various costs and security constraints depending on your needs. And so we make all of these models available within our platform for our customers and ourselves to experiment with and decide which one is going to work best for your particular applications. The second is Scale's data engine. So our backstory, our history is in creating the data assets that are needed to power the biggest and most complex machine learning models out there, whether that's self-driving vehicle technology or social media platforms looking to better understand trends. We provide the data annotation and human feedback services that are needed to improve those models. And we've built that into this platform as well. And so we talked a lot about fine-tuning, a lot about reinforcement learning. This is how we and our customers help to deploy really rapid human feedback to improve the performance of models for very specific tasks for our customers and create a truly proprietary advantage as you're building out generative AI. The third layer of the stack is what we call Scale Spellbook. This is Bihan's baby and has really been just a true unlock for developers as they're looking to create, deploy, test different models, maintain the applications that they develop, and retrieve enterprise data. All of this information, all of these capabilities are built into this platform in a really seamless way for a variety of different types of individuals to go in and build applications. And so not only do we help accelerate the first application build with this, but it's actually built to really enable you to scale up to dozens, if not hundreds of different apps for your business over time. And then the last piece here on top is the enterprise applications themselves. And these are the things that are really user-facing. And we've developed our own sort of standard applications around chat and copilots and industry-focused, vertical-focused applications for specific needs around retailers, e-commerce, and insurance, and financial services. So we have these standard applications that we offer our customers sitting within our platform, but we also help customers deploy bespoke apps as well, where we create the model, can establish an API endpoint that can be integrated downstream into customers' specific workflows. And so we help to deploy these truly in an end-to-end service using the entire stack. And so this is how we think about the needs and the requirements of helping enterprises go from just playing around with an OpenAI API or something like that, and actually really converting that to how do you scale up to your business? How do you deploy it in production? How do you get it in front of your customers? And so this is where we see a lot of the movement in the space and a lot of excitement in really moving into that industrialization phase. So the last thing that I'll wrap on here, and then I'll turn it back to Bihan, is just our expectations for 2023. Based on what we're seeing in the survey, from our conversations, every week is different. Like there's a new insight, a new change, a new technology out there. But one thing that's definitely true is that we will continue to see increased investment in AI. And I think that is quite clear. It's clear in our survey, and I expect it to be even clearer next time we run it. I think we're going to see really widespread experimentation. Most of our customers are definitely already experimenting with generative AI. But I think 2023, as we round the corner towards the second half of the year, we'll see some enterprises starting to truly scale it up. But we won't see broad, productionization in 2023 across every industry and every customer. I think a lot of customers are really starting to think about how they do that. But the path will be a few months out, maybe into 2024, before we see truly broad distribution across the enterprise. The third here is competition in large language models, whether it's new models coming out that can do amazing things, or whether it's existing models really showing their power for different solutions and different types of use cases and applications. Right now, there are a couple leading models that most people think about first, but we see the space becoming highly competitive, and there being just a number of solutions that can do amazing things for businesses. And we advise our customers to experiment and explore the different ones that are available today, including Cohere. Lastly is growth in application of fine-tuning with proprietary data. This is a place where, as we move from experimentation to implementation, large enterprises are going to realize that this is an absolute requirement for getting to an enterprise-grade deployment of generative AI. And we think that companies will continue to move in this direction, and being able to do that at scale will be a really important consideration. So, Bihan, I'll turn it back to you, and we'll move to some questions.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for demystifying enterprise generative AI. So I'll ask a few questions first and then turn it over to audience Q&A. So if you're in the audience, feel free to drop your questions in the chat for both Jonathan and David. So Jonathan, I'll start with you. When thinking about generative AI, most businesses are just starting to learn about the differences amongst model providers. What makes Cohere different?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Cohere, we're the enterprise partner for large language models. This drives how we think about model development, product development, and how we engage with our partners and our customers. And we try to invest in what matters most for enterprises. This comes to life through safety. So we're pioneers on the private deployment of large language models. It's something we're extremely proud about. And our partnership with AWS SageMaker enables Cohere to deploy within your environment on AWS. We've really been blazing the trail on data security, data privacy through our deployment mechanisms. In addition, we've taken a multi-product cloud approach. So unlike others in the space, we bring our models to you. We don't require you to come to where our models are. We make product investments that are tailored towards the enterprise. So we've spoken a lot about fine-tuning. We have to go back to before everybody was tuned into this, a couple of years ago, where Cohere was actually the first provider to offer fine-tuning as a service. And we're leaning heavily into the use cases that enterprises care most about, like retrieval augmented generation use cases. And then finally, we're very proud of the customer support that we have and the partner engagement. We just announced a partnership with LivePerson. This is a great example where we're doing some incredible work with their team on how to bring this technology into the customer support realm in a way that leads to tangible business impact. And so the summary of that is we're really focused on the enterprise and helping enterprises use this technology to make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. David, a question for you. You touched a lot about, the importances of like fine-tuning and for enterprises looking to use generative AI. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why fine-tuning is super important? Oh, David, I think you're muted.
Thank you. So the base models that everyone's played with are really amazing. Like you can do all sorts of things with them out of the box, and this is especially as kind of a personal user. Typically have my browser open as an alternative to Google to use it on a daily basis. But what you see in enterprise situations is that there are two things that are super important for an enterprise. And one is that these models are trained on public data. So all of your internal data in your own company, these models have never seen before. And so the first thing is you have to provide that information, that input to the models to be able to not just query knowledge from them, but also understand the language and how you use it and the different applications. And so the first step is providing that sort of proprietary knowledge base into the models. But the second step is each use case and each application of generative AI, kind of like if you think of like the performance requirements or the specificity of a specific task, base models are really good at like a broad set of things, but when you get to some very specific tasks, you need to be really precise in what the output looks like. And that's where human feedback comes in, where you can actually tell the model like, hey, like when you're doing this specific thing for my business, whether it's answering a question about claims for an insurance organization in a very specific way for that enterprise, it needs to be able to understand how that expert within the insurance company would like to see the information. And without that tuning, without that training, it's just not going to be able to do it because it's never seen it before. And so when you look at real, like large scale applications across thousands of users in an enterprise or millions of customers, having that fine tuning, having that feedback coming in to tell the model, here's what good looks like, is super important. And without that, a lot of enterprises will we'll see insufficient performance to be able to achieve their goals for the business case that they've built.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see we've got a lot of questions from the audience. I'll just pull a few of them for our panelists. So first question for Jonathan. If we look at classical AI investment, 80% of trained models never get deployed. How will that be different with generative AI versus discriminative AI?
First off, I love that there's tons of questions and lots of engagement coming in. And if our job was to demystify AI adoption, hopefully we've done a little bit of that. But I'm loving that there's lots more questions. In terms of thinking about the usability of AI models historically versus today, we're just talking about different categories of use. The applicability of models today, how powerful they are, what they're capable of, is unlike anything that came before. And so while before it may be that the majority of AI models were actually not used in production, but I think that's really going to change. And that's just all predicated on what these models are capable of doing. And we're simply in like the dawn of a new era when it comes to what these models can do. And so I think that's really going to spark a shift into like mass adoption and usability. It might not all happen overnight, but it certainly feels like it's happening far quicker than ever before.
Yeah, definitely. Next question for David. What kind of adoption are you seeing of generative AI in the media and entertainment industry?
Yeah, I think media and entertainment is really, really interesting for generative AI. I mean, obviously media and entertainment covers like a lot of different areas, right? But if, in media to start with, actually across media and entertainment, basically these companies are like creating information of some kind, whether that's, written text for journalism or images, or images or video or otherwise, if you're in, entertainment. So where generative AI really comes in is in, I think, augmenting like the human process of creating that content as a starting point. And so whether that's, summarizing information from a variety of news articles, being able to, get to a very specific set, summarized content is one example. You could also essentially generate your starting copy that, converts a writer to, a writer plus editor and gives them a starting point to really customize and accelerate the process of content creation. Media is a great place, whether it's image generation or video generation. I think the capabilities of some of these image models are going to just explode as we get to really fine-tuned capabilities. And so you really are going to just see the acceleration of the creation. And then as you kind of like go, progress through to the consumer, also being able to understand the trends and reactions and surfacing insights about how they're experiencing or reacting to that content, whether in social feeds or in commentary or otherwise. So I think those are just a couple examples, but I think it's a great industry for generative AI to help boost and augment how humans do their jobs.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Jonathan, I guess first question, there were some folks asking how was most relevant decided, referring to your slide 6. And a follow-up question, generative AI suffers from echo chamber issues when doing feedback loops. How can we improve the processes around those to reduce the echo?
Great. So I'm sharing my screen now, or trying to. I don't know if it can get beamed forward, but the question was around the third step here, which is how do we re-rank based on relevance to the query? And I don't know if you saw this, but just over the last few days, over the last week, Cohere launched a new product in beta, which is our re-rank endpoint, and we're super excited about it. The re-rank endpoint is the third step here, where you take the initial retrieval phase, which might be hundreds or 1,000 documents, and then you use the re-ranker, which is an endpoint to actually determine the relevance to the query. And it's actually more accurate than standard semantic search over embeddings or legacy lexical search. And what's really nice about re-rank is you don't have to rip out and replace what you have today. It's an add-on. It comes after you do that initial phase of retrieval and is a power-up to actually get better results. And so that is how we determine relevance to the query. It is a beta launch, so you can get early access to it as it is being developed. Encourage you to check it out if this is interesting to you. I will stop sharing my screen here. And Bihan, I'll answer the second question, which was around how do we avoid having an echo chamber in this space? I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get diverse viewpoints, people with diverse backgrounds and experiences active in the conversation around generative AI, having input on products. There are people who are building it. This technology is going to impact all of us. And so we need to make sure that we're getting as widespread and broad of perspectives on this technology as we can. At Cohere, this is something we are leaning very heavily into, we care deeply about. But as an industry, we can always do better. We should always be striving to do better and to incorporate more voices and be really thoughtful around how this technology develops, because when we're talking about things that are at the scale of the Industrial Revolution, the impact is going to be felt by all of us.
Yeah, thanks for the responses for both of those. David, question for you. What are the key challenges that enterprise companies typically face when implementing generative AI technologies, and how can these challenges be effectively addressed and overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the starting point here is that it's super easy to get started, and it's super easy to experiment. What I love about that question is it's about implementation. And so, I think that one of the challenges we talked about is in getting to a degree of performance of the models that companies rely on. I mean, you can demo something for your executive team that everyone is wowed about, but then when you actually run it in production, you have to make sure that it's highly performant. And so that's a big challenge in being able to fine tune and customize the data or customize the model is a really important challenge to overcome. The second is the tooling and services to actually manage these things at scale. And so actually building out the infrastructure to be able to monitor, evaluate, and scale up dozens of applications in an enterprise setting is really important. And so for both of these things, this is where we believe that Scale is filling that gap by providing this this platform to enable fine-tuning, customization, model evaluation, and deployment. And all of these things is where we think Scale plays a major role in helping enterprise customers bridge that gap. The other thing that I would say that I think even after production, one of the big hairy challenges is going to be business process and change management as well. And so it's not as simple as just like plugging in a model and hoping your internal organization uses it or hoping your customers love it. This is going to create an entire change in how business models work, in how companies organize their functions, about how their individual teams do their work. And so I actually think there's a huge step that we haven't even begun to address, which is how do you actually get your organization to adopt it and really sort of like implement generative AI mindset and using sort of human augmented tools to be able to take advantage of the technology. And I think that will be probably a theme in 2024 that will surface around the next challenge that enterprises need to face and address as they're deploying the technology.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think we have time for one more question. So I guess last question for both of you guys. What can the folks on the call do today to take advantage of generative AI?
Jonathan, you want to go?
Sure. David, I love the point you just made around change management. This requires a fundamentally different way of engaging with technology. And so that is going to be a huge component of how enterprises do or candidly don't adopt this technology if they're not able to solve that piece. So I think it's a great point. I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record here. You got to start building. Like if you're on the call today, you're excited about this, you're wondering what you can do to take advantage of generative AI, start building. You have an idea for something you think would be neat or would be cool or make your life better or your job better. Try building it. See if it works. If it doesn't work, why doesn't it work? Use that to inform how you think of the technology. If it does work, amazing. Like run with it. Keep building on it. And so like the most important thing is build. Cohere is a free developer tier, so go over to our website, take advantage of that. But just whatever you're doing, I really hope that you're hands-on with the technology. That is the best way to learn about it, and candidly, like the most fun too.
Couldn't have said it better. Same advice. Just get started, get experimenting, get your teams using it, get some feedback. And I really think getting started now, it's kind of like an investment portfolio. If you started investing even a couple dollars at 22, the value of that is going to compound. And so having the ability to quickly get started will serve significant return in the long run. And I just say, if you want help getting started, go to spellbook.scale.com. We have free tools, free versions of our developer platforms to enable folks to really get their hands dirty and start building.
Awesome. Thank you both so much again for your time today and your presentations and, interacting with the audience. And thank you to everyone who joined to watch. We'll send a follow-up email with all of the resources and some links for resources that people in the audience can use. But yeah, thank you both for an amazing presentation.